originally was called Jab, 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 Left Hook.
Yeah.
It's both books were trying to accomplish the same thing, which is talk deeply about why organic social media content matters.
Yeah. I actually heard the audiobook version and I was impressed about your improvisation skills.
Oh, when I call
yeah. Is that like an always on part of your life?
Yes. It might be my biggest strength. Yeah. I very much. It's how my sense of humor is. It's more improv than stand-up. It's a big part of my creative process. And yes, what you got to see that day was how many of the best things that have ever happened to me have happened. You know, I sense something. It could happen to me during this interview.
Yeah.
Actually happens a lot when I'm interviewed because questions are taking me down different paths than I'm taking my own self.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually got really inspired by that because I have published 2 books and I was thinking about making the audiobook version and I actually fell in love with that version because it was like a podcast.
100%.
Yeah.
You would be great at it.
And since the early days, you were like that? Like since...
As a child even?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was very disruptive in class because if I had an idea, even if my teacher was presenting, I just never was able to contain my enthusiasm, my passion. And I've always allowed it. I didn't want to contain it. I think today in society, through medicine and through parenting and through society, we try to contain art. I think it's a huge mistake.
Yeah, and I think it's an essential part of keeping the artistic process alive. Like I'm a really big David Lynch fan.
Yes.
And I've heard interviews about his creative process, and he calls them happy accidents when those kind of eureka moments happen, like on site.
I don't even, to your point, it's funny where we're going with this. I don't even think about it any other way. Yeah. I actually think scheduled or structured creative brainstorms by nature have already eliminated the opportunity for it to be truly creative. Yeah.
And how do you professionalize that? Because structure is sometimes like a necessary process to become a professional at certain...
I think that's very well said. The way I do it is through culture. Okay. So what I mean by that is, to your point, I have a 2,500 person global marketing company that only schedulizes its brainstorming and things of that nature. But the culture of eliminating fear is actually the single most important variable of creativity.
Okay.
So let's break that down. The real artists of the world, in whatever genre, they're less scared.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a really important part in social progression to have that artist mindset, because I was watching a couple of months ago this really cool documentary, and there was this girl called Nettie Oxman, and she had like this graph that tried to represent human progress, and it all started with art, because art usually asks like the questions about what's next, and they don't necessarily have the skills or the knowledge to materialize it, but they think outside of the box. Once the artist asks that question, it's then the job of science to provide like the building blocks of the idea, and then it turns down to engineering, and then it eventually turns out to design, and then the design is the input for the new generation of artists to start the cycle all over again. So you need that artistic mindset to think forward, right?
Yeah, I mean, for the way I see the world is math and art are foundational and incredibly special. And some people over-index very heavily to one side or the other. My great gift that I'm thankful for is I think I blur those lines. I value both very much. And to double click into what you just said, that's exactly right. I mean, there's if black and white ruled the world, everything would be figured out.
Yeah.
So to me, the gray, the art, is profoundly important. And really, so much of our passions as human beings sit in art. And art comes in so many shapes and forms, not just the way most people think about them. You know, food. I think for us, we've all lived in an era where food is art.
Yeah.
Like, we respect chefs today. 50 years ago, the chefs were help.
Yeah, sure.
Looked down on. So I think we keep evolving and understanding art. And yeah, I mean, I agree that it is It is probably the most wonderful currency in our society.
And there's like a potential to find a canvas in every form of work. Do you think so?
100%.
Like everybody can find the artistic value in their own work.
Oh gosh. I mean, my sense of art is pretty broad. Like I think it is, I think the way I manage people is art.
Yeah. How do you build this sense of culture? Because I've been following you for a couple of years and you're like this voice sometimes inside my head. Like you have these phrases that eventually I think about it, especially when I had an agency in Mexico. How do you build that sense of culture?
I think by taking on the responsibility that you work for everybody and not that they work for you.
Okay.
I think the reason I've been able to do things is real leadership is to make it good for them, not for your pocket. So I think intent starts with intent. Do you want to have a good culture, or do you say it and not mean it, and what you want to do is have a good P&L? You know, if you're going to invest in culture when you manage a lot of people, it's going to come at the expense of profit.
Sure.
You know? And so, and I don't mean like you throw parties and you have a foosball table in your office. I mean the grace and patience you give employees to get there instead of firing them costs a lot of money. I can't even comprehend how many tens of millions of dollars I've lost by giving people more room over the last 30 years to have them not deliver. But it has a higher impact on the overall culture when you're a place that tries to be like that.
And how do you like verbalize all that you said, like in a business perspective? Like how do you convince everybody that that's the right path to follow? Because you had a lot of success with this mindset, but how can you pursue or persuade everyone else that that's the way to go?
By not having passion on persuading or convincing. I'm not in the convincing business, I'm in the conviction business. I don't control the other man and woman on the other side of this podcast. I can only speak from the happiness and the joy and the truth that I live. And I'm aware that it may impact someone in a way, but I think when people get focused on convincing and persuading, that is ego. I have no interest in everybody doing it my way or believing in my way. I have interest in oversharing it with the hope that it brings other people joy at the same level that it's brought me joy.
Yeah, it's like a stoic perspective that you're only responsible for what you can say, but not what others can interpret.
I also think, yes, and I also think it's the most common sense. To me, sometimes when I hear stoic or stoicism, it makes me smile because in my brain, I think of it sometimes as common sense. Yeah. In what world do I have control over you?
Yeah.
I think people are very insecure, and I worry about that. And I think Gary Vee exists because I hate insecurity. I want to champion people to get more confident, to be more happy. But I am not audacious enough to think that I've got it figured out. I'm just passionate to over-communicating what I